St Paul's Cathedral website branding Winston Churchill pretty much judged poll after poll as the greatest ever British, well, it's not just statesman, but British man, as a white supremacist and unashamed imperialist. They're so upset, the family of Sir Winston Churchill, that they complained, as did many others. The website has been changed. An apology from the wokerati at St Paul's Cathedral. But how does this even happen? Let's talk to Martyn Whittock. He's a historian and author and joins us now. Good morning to you, Martyn.
Good morning to you.
It is quite bizarre, isn't it, that there is this effort right now to completely rewrite history and rewrite the knowledge we have of all of our great leaders by judging them according to the standards today. Now, the views on so many issues, whether it's on gay rights, trans, women's rights, things, have changed, race in particular, have changed hugely, not just in the last 100 years, but in the last even 5 or 10 years, they have changed massively. I mean, there is a basic fault, isn't there, judging historical figures, although recent history with Winston Churchill, by the values and attitudes of not even all people today, but some people today.
Well, I would not have used those words that have been used and have now been taken down, because I don't think Churchill can be summed up in that way. But he was, and I admire him immensely. I think he's an outstanding war leader, extraordinary Britain. But I have to say, he was complicated in some ways that often are not reflected in popular perception.
He wasn't a saint. Who is?
No, exactly, that's right. And he was also capable, we must admit this, he was capable of saying some things about race and ethnicity that nowadays would give real cause for concern. Apparently, in 1955, he's alleged to say to the cabinet, "We need to keep England white."
Do you know what? The awful thing, that would have been the mainstream view at the time. That was a fairly mainstream view in the 1970s during my lifetime. But judging people based on that, it's like the Americans judging, Thomas Jefferson, or he owned slaves. I mean, it's absurd. You're applying today's values to many years ago.
What's necessary is seeing him in his time. Now, basically, he was an imperialist. He deeply opposed Indian independence. He tended to have a paternalistic view of non-white cultures, but his most intemperate speech was reserved for opposition to the British Empire. And I think for Churchill, it was not personal and it wasn't fixed. He could be contradictory, highly complimentary to Indian troops and the Indian nationalist Nehru, for example. And I think that if we're going to evaluate Winston Churchill looking back, but also in the context of his time, we do need to see him warts and all, as Oliver Cromwell once said to his portrait painter. And I think we need to recognise that he was an outstanding war leader, an extraordinary Briton, but we also need to recognise he wasn't a plaster saint. He was capable of very flawed utterances on imperialism and race. In that sense, he did reflect a great deal of what was going on in contemporary society at all sorts of levels. And I think we need to explain that carefully and sensitively, and that's why I think the Cathedral should have just focused on the war leadership, and this other conversation has to be had much more
separately. But again, I mean, I want to say to you, Martyn Whittock, why was he buried in St Paul's Cathedral? Because he was our greatest war leader. That was why. Everything else is irrelevant. I don't know. I don't care whether he had affairs. I don't care if he beat his children. It's totally irrelevant to the reason why he is voted in poll after poll, even to this day, as our greatest leader. Martyn Whittock, historian and author, so appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll come on again.